All right. Been a long time since I've shot one of these, and I don't know. I don't know what is happening with me personally, but I'm just in a mood, in a zone where I just want to film some stuff and talk about it. And a couple days ago, I think what put me in this was just a lot of the self-reflection and some of the introspection. I posted in the last video, just kind of talking about the journey with the cars and people and the experiences and all that stuff, and how some of the ethos with this car has changed for me personally, and specifically, and how the mentality for me is changing, and why I really want to talk about that, because there's something really interesting happening with 944s, and it's actually kind of it's wild to think about, but it's so funny. So if you're watching this channel, you're familiar with this car's generalization throughout its entire lifetime. Bastard, redheaded stepchild, unloved, not a 911, engines in the wrong place, keys in the wrong place, that kind of deal. Water cooled instead of air cooled. The real funny thing is if you sit there and you think about it, people were ordering these off the trucks when they were new. They were the most popular Porsche up until the Boxster. So 1982 to 1993, essentially. I'm counting some of the 968s in there, and now there's a reason why I'm not including the 924 in that, because the 924 is very important, and so I don't want to come off as sounding as though I'm disregarding the 924. But specifically, the 944 in terms of sales was the most popular car. Got Porsche through the 80s, and for very good reason, right? So it kind of begs the question, why were they so unloved for so long? And the real fact of the matter is I don't think there's ever been a period in this car's life where it wasn't loved. But the demographic that was purchasing them wasn't exactly maintaining them up to Porsche standards, because price to entry point was so low. Drive the car around, it breaks, probably not mechanically inclined. And also at that time, it wasn't really kids that were buying these. It was people who were probably in their, late 20s, maybe mid 30s, trying to get a car to get into, dive into. And, just a project car, something that's cool, whatever, $3,000, sure. And that period of time was around, I want to say, the late 90s to early 2000s, because at that same time, you still had racing series that were very popular with the 951s, the turbos, and other kind of stuff. So NA breaks down or whatever, you're going to do a timing belt water pump job. You paid $3,000 for the car. It's $1,500 for a timing belt water pump job, or $3,000 for a top end job at that time. Doesn't make sense. Let the car sit for 15, 20 years. Now all of a sudden here we are, right? So my broader point is these cars are unloved depending on who you ask. If you talk to anyone who's owned one, they all love them. If you look at the sales statistics and numbers, everybody loved them. So I don't know, man. Just the magazine headline of being the bastard child, unloved cars. It's kind of disingenuous if you ask me. And so that brings me to what is interesting that I want to talk about right now. A lot of the kids that are buying these cars, it's cracking me up. They don't want to F with them. They don't want to change them. Just keep the car stock. Put the stock wheels on it. Put the stock bulbs in it. Put the stock intakes on it. Put factory OEM available stuff on there. We're not talking about 70-year-old men at Cars and Coffee. Like, we're talking like 16, 17, 18, 19-year-old kids, which is so funny because I remember being a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid. And even at that point, I was never so purist, so to speak, about the 944 platform. And so it's really funny to see these cars in very odd categories now, because now you have the people who just keep it stock, don't touch it, don't F with it, whatever. And while you would expect that to be the position of someone who's older, I find it interesting that the younger kids, the younger generations who are just getting into these cars want to bring them to life but not really mess with them too much. So I personally am kind of the oddball with all the stuff that I'm doing here. Decals and tail lights and Apple CarPlay and whatever else. But, and I'll talk about why I did a lot of this stuff in a second here. But for the older demographic, you would really expect that. You would want someone, or I wouldn't say you would want someone, but you would expect that when these cars were brand new in the 80s and, you know, someone at that time was 16, 17, or maybe even in their mid-20s, and this was the like newest bitchin' thing on the block, and you just couldn't afford it at that time. And so all these years later, 20, 30 years later, you want something that is going to harken back to that era because you remember when these cars were new. And that's something that I personally didn't understand until, just watching the evolution of the 997s, right? I remember when those cars were brand new, everyone talking about build quality and interior and water cooled and the car's too fat and all kinds of stuff, even compared to the 996s, which don't even get me started on 996s. But then, you know, I'm seeing video articles and all these video essays about the last analog 911 is the 997 because there's no electronic assisted steering. And it's stuff like that that just kills me. I mean, I have heard stories about people saying this about the 964. And there was a period of time where the 993s, even before they exploded in value, like it was the same thing, right? For one thing or another, car's too big, car's too heavy. Or at that time, you know, Porsche is clinging on to an outdated platform or whatever. And then the 996 comes out and no one's happy because the car is bigger and fatter and heavier and water cooled now. And so it's really interesting that this in its own weird way is experiencing some of those dogmas or transitions, or it's just sort of transcending all these things, I guess is the best way to put it. Because what's really funny about 944s, and I mentioned this in a couple other videos, but it's like rally car, race car, track rat, autocross, now like van lifing or on the road camper or safari build, just all kinds of crazy stuff. And so I think what I love about my car so much is that I don't really do any of those things, and I feel like there's a happy middle ground between like modifying the car for its driving. I don't want to say performance because it's not necessarily the performance, the driving experience, modifying it for the driving experience tailored to what its strengths are versus, the other side of things, which is RB swapping or LS swapping or doing all that other kind of stuff, which is, just straight line speed and whatever else. And it kind of begs the question, how far do you go, right? Like, why would you put X amount of money into an NA platform when you could throw that into a turbo? I think the difference is turbos are now 20 and 30 grand versus NAs. You could probably still get decent conditions around 10 to 15 grand. Now, I'm not saying that someone who would spend 15 grand on an NA would do all this stuff, even though I need to point the finger at myself here because, to be fair, that is pretty close to what I spent on this car to purchase it. But also you have to think that it's been, 4 years at this point of owning and daily driving the car and preserving it. And so the car is evolving with me as my desires and wants and needs for the car change. But at the same time, there's a lot of things that I want to not change, right? Like, I don't necessarily want to change the engine power plant or anything like that. I don't necessarily want to drastically change the look of the car, right? I'm talking like aero or body kit or whatever, except for maybe a couple things. I guess this is a long way of saying that my taste personally is what I consider to be OEM plus. And I don't know, like there's a lot of arguments that you could make that where it's too much. And so where is that line? And so I think I want to try to define that line here. So that line, at least in my perspective, is what do you use the car for, right? What is the condition of the car? What is the mileage on the car? All that other kind of stuff. If this was a 30,000 mile pristine piece that wasn't driven, that was, in the garage or at least well preserved, then I could understand not wanting to mess with stuff, not wanting to mess with the original factory equipment. Just keep the car preserved, enjoy it for what it is. You're not taking it out, you're not driving it ever. You're taking it to an occasional show, cars and coffee, maybe dinner, or just an evening drive. But you are one of those people who just wants to preserve what it was that you remember being new when it was first released. And then you have people like me who are younger, who, at this point I have 10 years experience owning stock 944s, and I've never had the ability to modify a car. And the other car I had plans for, things that I wanted to do that I could never afford to do, and then the car got hit, totaled, and I've lost the opportunity to do those things to that car. Now, granted, that car was higher mileage, but also at the same time, it was single family owned for like nearly 40 years. It was, I have the original paperwork for that car documenting all the way down to the literal dealer warranty contract, like crazy stuff. If there was going to be a car to restore, it probably would have been that one, just because of the history and the documentation. And of course, looking back on it now, there's a lot of things I could have done to that car differently in my ownership, just as far as taking better care of it and keeping it cleaner, like physically cleaner. I could have done a better job at that. And also I was just inexperienced working with, detailing paint and dealing with rims and all that other kind of stuff. And so that brings me to this car, right? I got this car, perfect condition, but again, it's not original paint. Car at that time had 140,000 miles on the clock already, so it had been driven. Seats had been recovered, the radio and stuff like that had already been changed. Just kind of things like that. And so I wanted to just drive the car the way that it was, because that's, to me, what made it special. And I knew that there were two reasons, to be honest with you, that I didn't start modifying things right away. The main one is because I was broke. Still broke, but got to do it for the channel. That's what I'm telling myself, but I digress. But also, it was just more so that I didn't really feel comfortable with the car yet. I was coming off of the accident, which felt like a huge waste of my time and effort to put all this stuff into a car, which could potentially get hit because I was driving it every single day. I had different insurance at that time, and just a lot of leading factors were just don't F with it. Just keep it the way it is, keep it running, and do what you can. And as I stated in one of the other videos, as things broke, that was the big lesson that I carried forth from the other car, which was, as things broke or manifested themselves as problems, rather than just trying to either Mickey Mouse the fix or whatever, fix it properly, but also do the upgrade. Make those leaps that I didn't really have the faith to do, not just in the products, but in myself, the ability to do those things, and just take the leap of faith and do it. Stuff that I'd always wanted to do. So when my fuel rail cracked, that's why I did the Lindsay Racing fuel rail. When my backup MAF, or my backup airflow meter, began to fail and the car started stalling just randomly out on the road, do the Lindsay MAF kit. I did the only thing I've really done preemptively on this car has really just been the DME. The DME was working fine, but considering the experience in the last car, I just decided to go ahead and change it out anyways. Anyways, I can talk more about the specifics and the mods I did and why I chose to do them in a different video, and specifically talking about the things I did. But really what happened was again, I just started using the car as a car every single day. And what really sort of took the shackles off, the self-imposed shackles of allowing me to be vulnerable with the car, because that's really what it is. Like, when you modify your car, you're doing it to your taste, and you're ultimately entering a contract that the amount of money that you spend modifying it probably is never going to come back to you. And you put yourself at risk for criticism and other people not liking it and all those other kinds of things. And as I mentioned in that 10-year video, Mike has always been the type of person. Mike is like the quintessential Porsche owner. He will. It's so funny because like even with his other cars, he will take them and try to restore them almost perfectly to how they were in a period correct sense. And even with him being the way that he is, from day one, he always made me feel comfortable about, after I bought the car, that, hey man, it's your car, do whatever you want with it. And I was apprehensive for all those other reasons, but mainly, and truth be told, it was scary for me to be vulnerable with a new car that I was buying from someone else, and having all my just really the trauma coming off that wreck of not being comfortable driving and not being comfortable modifying, and not wanting to let previous owners down, especially even though the wreck wasn't my fault. Like, I still had a lot of that guilt and carried that guilt, and I couldn't really be vulnerable with the car because I wasn't vulnerable with the drive. And so I was put in positions where, after finishing school, my first chunk of flight school, had to run back out and try to get a job and make some money, and then using the car every day made more stuff that was 40 years old start to break, and really put me in the mindset. That was really what kicked off that mindset of, well, why am I going to spend $700 on an OEM radiator with plastic end tanks when I could spend $700 for an aluminum one? That's the type of thing that started happening and manifesting. And when I had the ability to, especially to really beef the car up, to say, okay, I'm going to enter this like a self-agreement that this is my car. This is the car that I'm going to use for work. So it needs to be just as reliable as freaking possible. So all those things, not just rubber or whatever else needs to be replaced, but electronics, things like that. And one of the things that I was really fortunate about with this specific example is that the original owners did a number on this thing. They loved this car, so they were responsible for the respray, but they, shocks were done, and brakes, and the clutch was, when I initially bought the car, going through the paperwork, had maybe, less than 10,000 miles on it. And so at this point, it's maybe got 30,000 miles on the clutch. And it's almost like a brand new clutch. So I went into that going, okay, so I'm going to get the most practical tires I can get. Wanted to upgrade the suspension because I had the ability to do it. There were a couple for fun things that I did. Like, I got the seat covers. Those are ready to go because that driver's seat, even though these are refreshed, like within a couple months after being here in the desert heat, the driver's side bolster started to split again, which was a real bum out. But doing the Club Sport steering wheel, again, I thought that was going to be an aesthetic thing. Lended itself towards the driving experience. The poly bushings, I did that because one of my factory bushings blew out on my way home from work one day, and I was weaving all over the road going, what the hell's going on? So just kind of all these things manifested, and I was doing them just to kind of preserve and beef the car up. And then owning the Boxster taught me a really important lesson. Owning the Boxster taught me that at some point, at any point, if you buy one of these cars, any Porsche, doesn't matter, you just have to accept the realization that whether it's 130,000 miles in or 330,000 miles in, at some point it's going to need some form of mechanical restoration, because the reality is if you use your freaking car, you're gonna put wear on it. It's just one of those things. And so switching up the insurance, getting comfortable driving again, making some friends out and going for some canyon drives with other Porsche drivers who have done stuff to their cars, and going to different events and meeting people and seeing what they've done to their cars, and seeing the internet culture kind of surrounding the 944 and other people do their stuff. I figured, what is the point of owning this and sharing it if I'm restricting my own self and my own things that I want to do, things that I want to experience, things that I would want in my car. And switching up the insurance and feeling a little bit more comfortable about making changes to some things and upgrading things, and not just buying products, but investing the time to shoot videos on them or talk about them, install them, and enjoy the actual drive is really what sort of changed things. So, we did things like the tint and the brakes, the shocks, did the cooling system, redid the electrical system, the exhaust. Granted, again, it was another one of those things where just the stock stuff was on its way out, and the original not the original catalytic converter, because this cat had been replaced, but that had let go. So all right, well, whatever, I guess we're going to do an exhaust video. It's been that kind of thing. And so I think as I sit here now, I'm looking and I'm just going, okay, so what's next? Is this the end of my journey with this car as far as modifying it goes? I mean, is this where it's going to stay for the rest of its life until, I decide to do a full restoration where the car 20, 30 years from now is going to get completely stripped down and I want it to be factory? And as part of entering that vulnerability contract that I keep mentioning, I made one stipulation that I refuse to not adhere to, and that is, if I'm going to modify the car, it is absolutely 1,000% going to be reversible, right? So if I want to put the original steering wheel to the car on, I can. If I want to put the factory radio in, I can. If I want to put factory leather seats, I can. If I want to put factory non-adjustable suspension, I can. If I want to redo the cooling and do an engine rebuild and do whatever else, I can swap out the computer. I can do absolutely everything. I can undo it, and I could probably undo it within a weekend. Same things goes for these gauges, right? I have a strong suspicion that people are either going to love these or they're going to hate them. But like gauges, radio, steering wheel, all completely reversible without any significant or permanent modification that's been done. All of this can 1,000% be returned to the day that I bought the car. And that is something that I'm not willing to sacrifice on, as far as, continuing to modify the car and all that other kind of stuff. And so following those guidelines, I sit here, I'm wondering to myself, what am I going to do when it's time for a rebuild? Because there's so many things that I've talked about doing, like changing out the head, throwing in a hotter cam and just, going balls to the wall, make this the ultimate like Canyon weekend crusher. And while I'm in a position now for work where I won't necessarily need the car, which is really nice, school is relatively close, and the car is now reliable to where work and school, hopefully in the not super distant future, will be just a short commute versus me driving to college every day, which is 20 miles away, or driving to my other jobs, which were 10-ish 15-ish miles a day, and then doing the other things that I needed to do. There was a point where I was putting like maybe 150 200 miles a week on these cars. Like, I drove them, and even with this car, I've already put almost 30,000 miles on since buying it 4 years ago, which doesn't seem like a lot, but on a 35-year-old car, yeah, it's a lot. And in that effort to preserve things, right, keep things matching and original, I'm starting to wonder, what if instead of like just waiting for this specific engine to fail, which I guess if I'm going to talk about the engine, I should pop the hood. But what if instead of waiting for this specific engine to fail, waiting for a head gasket to go, or waiting for a rod bearing to spin, waiting for a timing belt to break, what if I keep this engine as the Porsche gods intended it to be, completely stock? Don't touch it as far as the mechanical internals go. Stock cam, stock intake, stock gaskets, stock headers, stock everything. And what if I start accumulating parts, because these engines are cheap enough to just go absolutely bonkers and get a different block, have it decked, bored, new pistons, Wasner pistons, get a different cam tower, have everything powder coated the way that I want, throw in a different cam, get headers and throw it on that engine, and just slowly over time build up this second engine to keep and have on the ready for whenever this one reaches the end of its life. And I'm not saying that's soon, but it could be 100,000 miles, it could be 200,000 miles from now, but just have this engine in the ether slowly being assembled over time, ready to go, so that when this one lets go, this comes out, a new engine goes in, enjoy the car for the rest of the, for as long as that engine lasts. And whenever the time for a restoration comes, the original engine will be outfitted completely with 100% factory and OEM parts. Everything will be completely restored, and just the whole 9 yards, like, whatever it's going to cost, 20 grand to do just a full factory spec rebuild, whether that's through Porsche or maybe not even necessarily allowing a third party to do it, like really seriously having it done by a Porsche Classic team or something like that. Just like animalistic levels, unnecessary levels of restoration. And I'm sitting here thinking, and I've been kind of walking around the car and taking it out on drives, testing the gauges recently, and I'm just going, this definitely is not the end of my modification journey. And it's definitely not the, the flatlining of my story with this car. I think it's only the beginning. So there it is. Just kind of all the stuff that's been floating around in my head. I just wanted to talk about it, share it with you guys, and just post something out there that lets you know that do whatever you want to your car. Don't let anyone else tell you otherwise. I absolutely love everything I've done to this car. And whatever I might not love in the future can just come undone like that. And when it really shows is when I'm like 3,000 RPM in the canyons ripping, just full send. Like that is where I'm like, yeah, I made the right choices, the right decisions. And now that I don't necessarily have to rely on this to be that daily driver, at least for the time being, and I can enjoy this a little bit longer, which is what I was hoping the Boxster was going to be able to allow me to do with this. Now that is still kind of in the cards, I'm going to allow myself the vulnerability of that. And so what I want this to be is just a mantra that, or if anything, just to let you know that all the things that you do to these cars doesn't just have to be mechanical restoration. Like, it doesn't just have to be fixing stuff that was neglected. Like, you can make these insane cars. So do it. Don't just feel so bogged down by doing timing belts or doing oil changes or doing whatever else. Like, hey man, if you need struts, throw some conies in it. Hey, like, you got to do brakes, then throw some slotted rotors, throw some beefy pads, throw an exhaust on the car. Like, don't wait. Don't skimp out on the experience of the car, because you never know when that experience might be taken away from you. So don't take the car for granted, I guess is my message here. So if you stuck around at the end of the video, if you stuck around and listened to me ramble this long, I really appreciate it. And hopefully, some of you guys out there will agree and you'll get what I'm saying. So, and if not, then it's understandable if you think I'm a crazy person. But yeah, it feels good to just kind of point and shoot and ramble about the car and talk. So thanks so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video.